Hi, so we're going to deploy an Azure firewall with a user-defined route table. So let's see how to do that. So we're back on our Azure portal and we need to create our virtual machine. So we're going to go to virtual machines and click create virtual machine. And we have to create the resource group RG-Lab19. Okay, virtual machine name Lab19. East USA is fine, no. And we're going to use Windows Server 2016 and standard D2S V3, it's fine. Username and inbound port rules none. Disk networking. I'm going to create the virtual network, so I'll call that VNet Lab 19. This is the address range, so we need two subnets. Subnet 1, which will be this, and the second one, let's just take a look at this diagram. And initially we had the web server connected directly to the internet. So this time we are not going to connect the web server directly to the internet. Instead, we'll connect it through a firewall, and that firewall needs to be in its own subnet, Azure Firewall subnet, which will be then connected to the internet. So we're going to create this and deploy it on the Azure portal. So let's do that. So we'll come back and we need to create that Azure Firewall subnet, and we'll just give it 10.0.1.0/24, and we'll click OK, and that's in. So we have our virtual network subnet 1. The IP we need none because we do not want it connected to the internet. Basic inbound port none, so that's fine. Next, next, review and create. So go to resource. So our virtual machine has been created, but we can't have access to the virtual machine because as we can see from the diagram, we need to connect it to the firewall because there is no access to the internet, unlike before. So let's just make sure that we also make the private IP address to be static so that it doesn't change. So to do that, we'll go to networking, and we can see our network interface card. So we'll just click on that, and we're going to change the IP address. So we'll go to IP configurations, see it's dynamic, we'll click on that, and we'll change it to static and save. Now it's saved. So next we need to create the firewall, because we want the firewall connected to the public internet, and then we want to set a NAT rule, that's network address translation rule, that will connect the firewall to move packets from the internet directly to the web server. So let's type in here firewall and click on firewalls, and let's click create. So we'll use the same resource group, and the name of our firewall, we'll just say Firewall Lab 19, and we need to put in the same region, so East US, and no availability zone, that's fine. So we'll put use firewall rules classic to manage this firewall, and we're going to use existing virtual network, the one we created, and we'll create the public IP address name, so to be firewall pip as public IP. Okay, and next. Let's create the firewall. So our deployment is complete, so we'll go to resource and let's go to our rules. So now we need to create the NAT rule because we want to connect the firewall to send traffic, that's the packets, directly to the server from the public front to the server. So we're going to add NAT rule and we're going to call this the firewall NAT rule, and just 1000 is fine. Subnet 1, protocol TCP is fine. Source from any source. Destination, that's to the firewall, so any clients trying to access the firewall, so get the firewall address, open in a new tab, overview. So get it from here, click on that, and now we can see the public IP address. Come back here and paste. Destination port 80, that's HTTP. Translated address will be the IP address, that's the private IP address of the server. So that is this server we made static 10.0.0.4. But I want to confirm that, so I'll come back here and click on web server, and can see that 10.0.0.4. so copy that, come back here and paste that, and translated port 80. So what this means is that any HTTP request from a client that is trying to access this the firewall public IP, it should transfer that request, that's the HTTP request, to this server here. So it's going to go in here and transfer it directly to the server. So that's it. So I'm going to add, so we'll refresh and we can see it's added the row. So let me change this to HTTP because we need to create RDP, that's this program that would help us access the web server. So it also needs to be redirected to the web server. So let me just edit that one, and oops, I can't change the name again, so that's fine, but I can make change here, HTTP firewall. So I'm going to create refresh, so I'll add a new one, and this time I'm going to say RDP firewall to web server, and just copy that here. It's 110 protocol, the same, source from any source, destination address. The destination address is the IP address of the firewall, so we'll do that again. Firewall copy, and we'll paste that there, and this time the port will be the port for the RDP. So that will be 3389, which is that for the RDP, that's the remote desktop protocol. So 3389, and the translated address will be the address of our web server, that's the private address, and 3389. So RDP will add And now we have the rule for the HTTP and the RDP. So let's see if we can connect to the web server. That's once we've set the network address translation rule. So come back and we need to open the remote desktop and let's put in the IP for the firewall, and the username is going to be the username we used here when setting up the web server. And save. Okay, fine. Connect. So it's asking for the password. That means there is a connection. So it means our firewall NAT rule is working. So okay, and now it asks for verification. So I'll say yes. So it means our firewall NAT rule is working, because now we are accessing the web server from the firewall. So let me open the Explorer, and that's fine. Okay, so Internet Explorer enhanced security is enabled, so I'm going to disable that. So I'll come to local server. Let's go to this and click on that, off and off. Okay, so minimize that, come back to Explorer. So let me just open these browsers as www.google.com. So create routes tables table and create, and we'll use the same resource group, and remember it has to be in the same region, East US, and the name we'll call it routes, that's route table and lab 19, and next. So we'll create and go to resource, and now we can see our route table options. So we'll go to routes and let's create the default route to force the packet from the subnet 1 to the firewall. So I'm going to call this route to firewall, and address prefix, we'll put the prefix to force it to the firewall. Then the firewall we have to select, and we have to use the firewall's IP address 10.0.1.4, and if we look at that's what we'll have here. That was what was issued to this. We can confirm that. Let me just open a new, let me go to home, open a new tab, and let me check for firewall, firewall, and we can see the private IP address. That's the one given. That's what we're using. Okay, so that's set. So let me add it to the subnet, associate, virtual network, and subnet 1. Okay, so that's done. So what we've just done is that we've used the route table to force packets from this subnetwork 1 to go through the firewall rules. So we're going to check to ensure that we can't have access anymore to our web pages that's trying to access through HTTP, because now the packets are forced through the firewall, and then we'll set up a permit rule to allow the HTTP access through the firewall. So let's go back, and let me go back to our web server, and now let's try and see if we can have access to this CNN. Let's click on any other thing. Nope, it's not working. So it's waiting for Google. It's not working. So let me try this other ones. bbc.com. Request from this to bbc.com. Deny. You see, no rule match. So that's our firewall. And cnn.com. Same thing, is forcing it. So let's go back and set to permit BBC, and we'll leave CNN to be off, so to be denied. So we'll go to firewall. Let me close this, and now we're in the firewall. We'll set rules, and this is the NAT rule for the NAT connection. So we're going to use application rule this time. Application rule, and we're going to call this allow services, and allow. Let's make this 100. And what do we want to do? We want to allow BBC, so IP address from any source, and want HTTP and HTTPS. Okay, that's 443 and 80. And we want from this domain bbc.com, so asterisk bbc.com.bbc.com. So add that, and let's refresh, and now we can see allow BBC. So let's go and check to be sure this is our BBC. Let's reload, and now we have access to BBC. Let's reload CNN. We don't. BBC. Okay, let me take this in a new browser, put that in. Now we have full access to BBC. But let me try CNN. Nope, still denied. So let me now permit CNN. So let me use the same. So I'm just going to edit this, and I'm going to add another rule, allow CNN and all, and HTTPS and asterisk.cnn.com, and save. So refresh. So we have two rules now. So let's go back. So cnn.com, and now our CNN has started loading again. So let's go back. So that's what we've been able to do. We've been able to successfully use the firewall NAT rule to ensure that traffic that comes from the public port of the firewall goes straight to the web server, and the web server also can send packets to the firewall. But we now use the route table to force every packet to go through the firewall rule, and now we can now control what goes in and out of the subnet 1 through the firewall.